turmeric. Is it an ancient superfood? Or have you been lied to and it's just another overhyped health fad, a big fat hoax and a scam? Well, the truth is somewhere in between. But here's a catch. A little sprinkle on your food won't cut it. If you want real results, you need to understand how turmeric actually works in your body. So stay tuned, because today we're breaking down the critical facts and the understanding that makes all the difference. Hello, health champions. Today we're going to talk about what happens if you take turmeric for 30 days. The real benefits if you do it right, and the pitfalls that waste your time and money if you don't. And first we need to cover a critical distinction that never gets talked about. And that is, it's not really about the dose. It's not about how much turmeric you take. It's about how does it get to where it needs to go. Because a lot of people have this simplified understanding that if you have a supplement or if you have a food and you put it in your mouth and you chew and swallow now, they believe that it's inside your body. And that is not how it works. Because first when you eat it, now it is inside your gut. It's inside your intestines. That's just a tube that's separate from your body. It starts in one end and goes out the other. If nothing leaves the tube, not a single molecule would enter your body. So from there, it needs to get into your bloodstream. But in the bloodstream, it's still not really doing much of anything because all the resources, their final destination in your body is inside the cell. So the cell is where you have your machinery. It's where you have your DNA. It's where all the enzymes, all the proteins, all the building blocks are made inside the cell. That's where the cellular machinery is, if you will. So just because you put it in your gut doesn't mean that your body can use it. So we really need to understand these three levels of absorption. And the more complex a molecule is, the harder it is to get it through. So for turmeric, less than 1% actually makes it from the gut to the blood. So 99% are going to stay in the gut, and then after that, even less than 0.1% actually makes it into the cell. So today we're going to talk about how to get it to the different levels, and does it really matter if we get it from one place to another? So now what happens to that 1% of turmeric that makes it into the bloodstream? Well, first of all, turmeric is fat soluble. It's a big molecule. And if it's fat soluble, then it's often treated as a foreign substance, a foreign body, an intruder. And it's also known as a xenobiotic. That means foreign, and your body is going to try to get rid of it because it's not the same as self. It's not your body's tissues. And now it's in the bloodstream. And if something foreign is in the body's going to try to flush it out, and then it needs to make it water soluble. It's going to conjugate it, make it water soluble. And this could happen already in the wall of the intestine as it's passing into the bloodstream. Or if it didn't happen there, then the liver is going to take care of it. And the body tags on something called glucuronide or a sulfate group. So now we have curcumin glucuronide or curcumin sulfate, which is water soluble, and now we can flush it out. So the key to understand about regular turmeric is that 99% stays in the gut, 1% gets into the bloodstream, or less than 1%, and that 1% quickly gets disposed of. And we also need to understand that anything that you eat that gets absorbed in your intestine gets into the portal system. It gets into the vascular system in your stomach, and all of that goes to the liver first. Everything you eat gets shuttled to the liver first before any other body part gets to have a look at it. So if the liver is really good at disposing and filtering out things, then the rest of the body is never going to see it. So in this case, 99% stays in the gut, but all is not lost. And we'll come back and talk about this because there are some benefits to that, having that in the gut. And if you've been around turmeric or curcumin for a while, you know that it's very, very popular to add pepper because people know that is so poorly absorbed, less than 1%. But if you add pepper, now you're going to absorb more. So what happens now is from the gut to the blood, we go from about 1% to somewhere between 5 and 8%. So a lot more of that turmeric gets into the bloodstream. But here's the thing. This is still fat soluble. It is still a foreign substance, and it's still going to get conjugated very, very efficiently by the gut membrane, by the wall of your intestine, or by the liver that gets the first shot at cleaning out everything. And it's so good at this, it gets rid of most of it on the first pass. So therefore, even though we get a lot more of it into the blood, we're not really going to get any more of this turmeric or the curcumin, which is the active component of turmeric, into the bloodstream. We're going to get a little bit more, but because the liver is so fast, it's going to clean that out before it has a chance to get into the cells. So quite recently there was a game-changing development. What they found is that if they take the turmeric, the curcumin, and they tag it to fenugreek seed, which has something called glucomannan, that's a fibrous substance, that's a soluble fiber. And if they kind of mix it and pack it with this glucose and with this fiber, then the fiber attracts water and it makes what's called a colloidal complex. And don't worry about the fancy words. It simply means this fiber pulls water to it and it sort of makes a bubble or a gel around the turmeric. So you want to think of this now as tiny, tiny bubble carriers. So each little piece of turmeric now has a carrier and it's enclosed in that bubble that's going to carry it and protect it wherever it goes. And this little bubble, this colloid, is relatively stable, which means it's going to break down. It's going to have a slow degradation. And that means it's going to have a slow release in the intestine. It's not all going to get just absorbed and then the liver flushes it out. It's going to be gradually absorbed. So we have a sustained slow release and therefore a sustained slow absorption. So it's like a trickle. We get a little bit during a long time and that makes it easier for the body to utilize it. So for these reasons, with this colloidal complex, we get a dramatically increased absorption of the turmeric into the blood from the gut. And now, unlike the plain turmeric or the turmeric that was assisted by pepper into the gut, now we have something that is already water soluble. It's not as foreign as the previous turmeric. So this protective colloid, it is water soluble. It is less visible to the liver enzymes. The liver is not going to catch all of it on the first pass. And also because it has this slower breakdown and more of it is going to get past the liver in that first pass. Now we're going to get a dramatically increased absorption, not just into the blood. So we have a lot more in the blood, but a lot more of that is now going to get into the cell. So let's look at this critical distinction and the 3 levels of where it needs to go again. But now let's put some numbers on it. So from the gut to the blood, if we have plain turmeric, now we said that 99% is going to stay in the gut. 1% is going to make it across this membrane and get into the bloodstream. If we add the pepper to the turmeric, we increase that. So about 5 to 8% is going to make it through. The rest stays in the gut. However, with this fenugreek complex, 70 to 80% stays in the gut, and 15 to 30% is going to make it through. So dramatically more, but the difference is much bigger than what it looks like so far. Because when we're talking about how much gets into the cell, remember that the first 2, the liver is going to clean out the vast majority of that on the first pass. So less than 0.1% is actually going to get into the cell, and 1 to 2 times more is going to get through with the pepper. But 1 to 2 times almost nothing is still almost nothing. Whereas with the fenugreek complex now we have this protective colloid. Now 25 to 40 times as much is going to make it into the cell as with the other 2 options. But there's one more thing that we need to understand that's critical to this table. Because when we look at how much gets from the gut to the blood and we compare pepper to the fenugreek complex, the fenugreek, it turns out, is a very clean process, very sophisticated process, whereas the pepper is very crude and it comes at a cost. So when we compare the pepper to the fenugreek, we see that the reason that we get more absorption with the pepper is that the pepper inhibits certain enzymes that maintain the tight junctions in the gut. So therefore, with the pepper, we increase the permeability. We get a little bit of leaky gut, and that's the reason that we get more of the turmeric through. But there's a price to that because we're also allowing other stuff to get through. We're allowing toxins and bacteria and unwanted substances to escape as well. And even if it's not bacteria, it's going to be lipopolysaccharides and portions and toxins from the bacteria that we don't want in the bloodstream. But now that we created a situation that's leaky just to get the turmeric through, we're also allowing all that stuff through. And that may not be the end of the world for some people who are relatively healthy. But if you have some gut issue already, if you have dysbiosis, if you have IBS, which stands for irritable bowel syndrome, or IBD, which stands for inflammatory bowel disease, or any form of autoimmunity, those are usually related to gut issues and leaky gut. You really don't want to compromise that intestinal membrane any more than it already is. So if you have any sort of gut issue, it may create more harm than good by using that pepper. Even if you end up getting a little bit of turmeric through, you're really compromising that gut membrane. And also, we need to realize that whatever benefit we might have from getting some turmeric through is rather short-lived because the liver is so quick at cleaning out all that turmeric in the bloodstream. When we compare that now to the colloid, to the fenugreek, now everything about this works with the body. It doesn't compromise it. We don't have any of the issues that we just discussed with the pepper. None of those. The fenugreek is very gut-friendly, and not only that, but the effect is sustained and sustainable. That means it's sustained because the stuff that gets into the bloodstream doesn't get swooped away. It doesn't get cleaned out right away. It's more of a steady supply. And it's sustainable because you can keep taking it for a long, long time since you're not going to compromise your gut. You're not going to make anything worse in the process. So now you understand how the different forms of turmeric get to the different places in the body. But now, why are we wanting to do this in the first place? What's the benefit? And how do the benefits differ in the different compartments in the gut, in the blood, and in the cell? And of course, we want to remind ourselves that turmeric has been around for thousands of years, long before we knew how to add black pepper, or long before we knew how to create a fenugreek colloid to get it across the barrier. So even just getting it into the gut must have some benefits. So if we take regular plain turmeric, the way we've used it for thousands of years, it comes from the turmeric root and we can use it as a spice. We can use it with food, and more recently we can grind it up in a powder and put it into capsules. And if we take it that way, like we have explained, then almost all of it is going to stay in the gut. So what are the benefits? Well, it does have a tremendous benefit in that it feeds the beneficial bacteria, and it tends to control and limit and reduce the harmful bacteria. So there in itself, that alone would explain why turmeric has been so popular and why people have noticed health benefits from it. And then in addition to that, it also has been shown to strengthen the gut barrier to reduce the amount of leaky gut. So that's a great thing. And in doing that, it reduces gut inflammation. So a lot of the inflammation comes from the harmful bacteria, and a lot of inflammation comes from the fact that if we have a leaky gut, then we have things get across the membrane that aren't supposed to, and those create sensitivity reactions and inflammation. But also, turmeric helps improve the flow of bile, and in doing that, it helps us digest fats better. So if you're using plain turmeric, then these would be the traditional benefits that you can get. And I love curry. I use it on a lot of different foods, and in some foods, I use a lot. Like in a recipe, I'll use like half a cup of curry sometimes. And so if you like it, I would suggest you sprinkle a lot of it on your food, and you will get some of these traditional benefits. And then we move on to the next compartment, which is the blood. And here there are still benefits. Remember the drawbacks that I talked about with pepper was the fact that we compromised the intestinal membrane, and we compromised our gut and immune system to a degree to get it into the bloodstream. But once it's in the bloodstream, it does have some benefits. However, they're going to be mild and transient, which means short-lived. And that's simply because there's not that much happening in the bloodstream other than transporting things. And it's going to be short-lived because it gets cleaned out so quickly. But we will see some systemic antioxidant effects because the turmeric or the curcumin can reduce the free radicals that we have in circulation. We will see some systemic anti-inflammatory effects because, again, the curcumin will have a modest effect in reducing C-reactive protein, which is inflammatory. It will reduce TNF-alpha tumor necrosis factor alpha and IL-6 interleukin 6, which are all inflammatory markers. And it will also support the liver in its detox process because it will have some short-lived support for those detox pathways. But now let's talk about the most exciting part. If we can actually get some of this curcumin into the cell, now we're talking about a game changer that we could never reach with the traditional use of turmeric or curcumin. And now we're going to see some deep and sustained benefit at a whole different level than in the gut. We're going to see anti-inflammatory effects, but now they're going to be at the level of gene expression. It's not just going to be working on some inflammatory compounds or some signaling molecules. We're talking about at the level of gene expression. So, inside the cell, this curcumin can reduce what's called NF-kappa beta at the genetic level. And this is a pro-inflammatory switch in your DNA. So by reducing that, we're indirectly affecting hundreds of inflammatory compounds. And then we have another switch called NRF2, which works the other way. It is also at the genetic level, but this switch is going to turn on our natural antioxidants and our detox system. So we have these two opposing switches, and curcumin works both of them in our favor. It basically turns down the bad one and turns up the good one. This NRF2 switch also affects our mitochondria in that it protects them and helps repair them better. And curcumin also increases the glutathione in the cell, which is our body's most important intracellular antioxidant. It's responsible for the majority of antioxidant activity. So it's much more important than any antioxidant that you would eat. And this is all part of these switches and control systems. But some of the most exciting benefits come from the neuroprotective benefits that we have. So it crosses the blood-brain barrier once we can get it into the cell. It also crosses into the brain cells and the neurons. And in there, it's going to help, of course, with the stuff we talked about with inflammation and antioxidants. But it's also going to boost BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is like this miracle growth for the brain that I often talk about. It helps the brain make new synapses, new branches, and new connections, and therefore it supports our neuroplasticity, our ability to adapt and create more complex neural networks. And it even has some metabolic support in that it can improve insulin sensitivity. It can improve lipid metabolism. And of course, very important part of metabolism is the liver, and it will support the liver's overall health. But remember these two last slides, all of these benefits can only happen if we get it into the cell. And that does not really happen with traditional use of turmeric. So if we start using turmeric for 30 days, what are the benefits that we can look forward to? Well, some of the first changes and improvements we're going to see very early in 7 to 10 days. We might see some gut effect, some improved digestion, some improved gut comfort. And part of this would also be reduced bloating because we have a better balance of bacteria. Now, we probably will also see an improvement in immune function and less inflammation because there's less immune hypersensitivity. The immune system is not overreacting as much anymore, and therefore, we'll see a decrease in systemic inflammation from the gut as well. And even though we can see these in just a few days, we're going to see the effects build over the 30 days. But then in 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to see the more far-reaching systemic benefits once we see some better gene expression from these factors that we talked about. So we'll see a reduction in body inflammation and stiffness. Potentially, we might see some clearer thinking with less neuroinflammation and with better energy production. We could think clearer, but also have better energy and mental energy levels overall. We will probably see an improvement in cellular defense and antioxidant capacity, which is a component of the immune system, as well as an overall more balanced immune signaling from the nervous system and from the overall control system. So, out of all the products, the different types of delivery systems that we discussed, I would suggest that you take some plain turmeric because it has some gut benefits. There's a long history for thousands of years. We know that even if we can't get to those last slides that I talked about with the intracellular stuff, there's still very substantial value to this, and it is very inexpensive. You can go to the farmer's market and you can buy the root for a few dollars a pound, or you can buy it as a spice and it's very inexpensive, and it is a wonderful spice, especially with Indian and Asian dishes. So, I love curry, like I said. And you could use the root, you can use the spice, and if you want to add on a little bit, the capsules can also be very inexpensive where they just grind up the powder. And there's nothing wrong with taking a few extra there. And then I would suggest also that you supplement and you try out if you really want the benefits of what turmeric and curcumins can do for your inflammation and your cellular health. Then you want to take some with that fenugreek colloid. And the best product that I have found and tried and used, it's called Turmeric Forte. It's by Meaty Herb and it's sold by the Standard Process website. I'll put a link down below, but with that, you're going to get tremendously more benefits. It is going to be more expensive than what you just buy from the farmer's market, but we'll talk about the difference here. And in terms of all the benefits we talked about, the fenugreek colloid is the game changer. So I would suggest that you do take the regular turmeric for the gut benefit. And because it's so simple, and then you take the fenugreek colloid, and with the turmeric, you can basically take as much as you like, as much as is tasty to you. And with the specialized supplement version with this colloid we're talking about, just a couple of pills and they're tiny pills, they go a long way. And when I say expensive, I just want to put that in perspective for you. So this Turmeric Forte, for example, they concentrate it 55 times to get the active components reduced down. So out of 6.5 grams of turmeric root, they concentrate out 101 milligrams of the active substance curcumoids, and that's standardized. So when you buy that, you know you're always getting exactly that, no more, no less. But now let's take into account the fact that first of all, it's concentrated 55 times, and then it is absorbed into the cell about 45 times better. That means that that tiny little pill with 100 milligrams is about the same as eating 250 grams of ground up powdered turmeric per day. And then if you were to take it in a capsule, your average medium capsule might have about 500 milligrams per capsule. So the equivalent of one tiny little pill would be about 500 capsules of turmeric powder. And if you wanted a really hefty dose and you took 2 of the Turmeric Forte, now that would be equivalent to about 1,000 capsules in terms of what you theoretically could get of the active component into your cell. Now don't do that. Don't even try it because first of all, you get really, really sick from just the sheer mass of capsules, but you would overwhelm your body can't even extract. So it's not a fair example. You'd have to do even more than that. There's no possible way to get that into your cell compared to what you would get with even 1 or 2 little pills. But don't take my word for it. Give it a try. I'll put a link down below, and then you let me know what happened in 30 days. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love that one. And if you truly want to master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, and turn on all the notifications so you never miss a life-saving video.